Good afternoon. We'll call this meeting of the Allegheny County Board of Legislators to order for February 10, 2025. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Mrs. Burdick. Here. Mr. Curran.
Here.
Mr. Demick.
Here.
Mr. Fanton. Mrs. Hanchett. Here. Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Havey.
Here.
Mr. Healy.
Here.
Mr. Rickey.
Here.
Mrs. Ricketts Swales. Here. Mrs. Root. Here. Mr. Rumfelt. Mr. Stockin.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
Thank you, ma'am. Before anything else, the clerk of the board has asked me if you are in attendance, if you have not, if you could please, upon exit, go ahead and sign the sign-in sheet so we have it for the record. We'd appreciate that. Item 3 in our agenda, attorney-client. Because there's so many people here, I hate the idea of kicking everybody out for 5 minutes to just bring everybody back in. So with the permission of the board, and I think I'll need a motion, is that right, Ms. Parliamentarian? Motion. Can I get a motion to forego item 3? Thank you, Legislator Root, seconded by Legislator Rickey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, before we get started here, I do want to recognize, of course, our guests today, Executive Director for the Accord Corporation, Leslie Gooch-Chrisman, Accord President and Board Chair, Carrie Whitwood. If there are any other, I do see a couple anyway, other Accord board members, I do want to thank you for your presence here today as well. Ms. Julie Schmidt is here as District Coordinator for Senator George Borrello's office. I'd like to welcome her. Hello. And then I know Mr. Prieto is having the same parking problems that we all have when we come on the Hill. He's Deputy Chief of Staff for Congressman Langworthy. He'll be coming in shortly. So this meeting is being held at the request of Congressman Langworthy, Senators Borrello and O'Meara. On January 29th, the board received a letter from those three requesting that the county investigate the suspension of services by Accord Corporation that were initiated on January 28th. Before we get into any of this, I do want to make it clear that the county really has no supervisory or administrative authority over the Accord Corporation. They have their own board of directors that hold and maintain that authority. What we do have are a number of contracts with Accord, and so to that end, I think it is appropriate that to at least that extent we have a better understanding of how those contractual obligations were or were not fulfilled by Accord Corporation over that short suspension. What I've asked Leslie to prepare for us, and I believe she has, is just a brief narrative, and maybe I should probably take a step back here and tee it up a little bit for those who aren't familiar with the situation. President Trump issued, wasn't an executive order or a memo, but had the same effect, which was providing a temporary freeze to federal funding for grants and so forth. That was on the 27th. It caused quite a bit of confusion across all of government and not-for-profits. Accord wasn't alone in that. What that triggered with Accord Corporation, and Leslie will get into the details of it, was a suspension of services. So what we're going to do today is go through that timeline, the decision-making process, what services were and weren't provided, and for how long they were paused. There are a series of questions that were provided by Congressman Langworthy and the senators. We're going to work our way through those questions. Ms. Gooch-Chrisman and Ms. Whitwood are prepared to answer those questions, after which we're going to open it up to the board for any further questions or comments from the board. So I'm hoping we can, as a board, agree, maybe if questions arise as we're fighting our way through this, make a note to yourself and we'll hold all of our questions to the end, because there's a pretty good chance those questions will be answered between the beginning and the end. So with that, I want to welcome you once again, and I apologize to the counselor, I forgot his name, but the gentleman to Leslie's right is counsel representing the Accord Corporation. You're welcome to introduce yourself if you like.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Rogoff. I'm an attorney for Parks and Payment in our Rochester office, and I'm simply here because, am I not on? There we
There
go.
you go.
Sorry about that. So, can you hear me better
Yes.
now?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Once again, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Rogoff. I'm an attorney with Barclay Damon in our Rochester office. I'm here simply because two members of the organization, the executive director and the board chair, were asked to appear before you, and I'm just here mostly as an observer.
Thank you very much. One last thing before, and maybe just for your benefit, Counselor. It's not at all unusual, we receive monthly reports and verbal reports from our county department heads, but many outside contractors as well, such as Cooperative Extension, Soil and Water. This is not particularly other than the fact that there's a table there instead of a podium, it's not completely out of the ordinary for us to receive reports from contractors. Carissa?
I would just like to add, I noticed you had a little help with your mics. When they are red, they are live and you're on. And there's a little button that if you see down below that's also red, it has like a person speaking. If you wish to turn it off, you just hit that and it turns off in case you want it off for any period of time.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. With all that out of the way, Leslie, thank you again for joining us. And if you could just provide us with a timeline of the events from, let's say, January 27th to full resumption of services on the 30th.
Okay. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you to each of the county legislators. We appreciate the opportunity to speak directly with you and to answer any questions and concerns. Certainly, with hindsight and reviewing our response to this situation, there are things that I wish I could have done differently or I did do differently. We're going to kind of go over what those are, but I do want to thank you. I really want to thank you for this bottle of water because I'm pretty sure my nervous throat's going to close up at any moment. But I just kind of want to give you an overview of what happened to us. It was rapidly occurring, and I'm probably leaving out some details, so I welcome your questions. We are really trying to focus on moving forward, continuing to provide services to the community. I've been here at Accord for 30 years. I've been in a leadership role for almost 11 next month. So I hope to continue to be able to serve our community in the way that I have and intend to do so going forward. So I'm just going to give a brief overview in terms of what happened, and again, we'll take it from there. So thank you. First of all, we deeply regret the inconvenience and uncertainty that the pause in Accord Corporation services caused, particularly our program participants, but our staff and community and our partners as well. So what happened was on the 28th of January, we received a memorandum from the U.S. Office of Management and Budget that said in part, federal agencies must temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance and other relevant agency activities that may be implicated by the executive orders, including non-governmental organizations. So we read through that many, many times, trying to make sure that we knew what we were responding to and what we could expect as the day unfolded. As a non-governmental organization, we sought clarity and attempted to access reimbursement for services we had already provided under our federal contracts. As of 9 a.m. on 1/28/25, we were unable to access the federal payment management systems we use for reimbursement. Under most circumstances, we would have taken a few days to get some more information. This was different for a variety of reasons. The first was that we had no assurance we would be paid for the services that we provided during the federal pause. So that was in the morning of the 28th. What we read led us to believe that we would not be reimbursed for services that we provided after 5 p.m. on that same date. Clarification came, but not not till later in the day, and it came after we had agreed to and communicated the pause in our Head Start services and in alerting our community. Even after we received this clarification, which came from a lot of different sources, we didn't get information from any of our federal funding sources that we communicate with regularly. And this is where I wished I'd done something different, and we can get into that a little bit. But because our payment systems were down, and we understood they were down for many federal programs and agencies outside of a court as well, we determined that we had to pause services. Ordinarily, we would say, let's just ride this out and see what's happened, but there was a couple things that were occurring simultaneously. These things happen from time to time in a nonprofit. Almost probably 99% of our money is reimbursed, so we have to spend it, then we get it back. And when they shut down the systems, we do intend to go into a panic because we've already spent that money. So that was a Tuesday. We had a full payroll, a 2-week payroll that we needed to process and get to our staff for that Friday. Also occurring, that was the third payroll in January, which puts extra stress on your financial systems. The second thing was that at that point in time, we were down in cash receivables by about $421,000 from various funding sources that had owed us that money for more than 90 days. So that put us in a cash flow situation already. On top of that, we had about $165,000 out in development costs that we were also waiting to get reimbursed for a project that we were actually hours away from closing on that project. So when you combine that, we were down, almost at over $500,000 in receivables that we had put out of our own, of our funding, and didn't have available to us. So we were faced with, if we couldn't do our Head Start draw and get the money that we had already spent in terms of staff services for that money, we would just not have enough cash on hand to actually meet that payroll going forward. So that was one of the reasons that we were very, very nervous. And the second reason was, of course, we weren't sure that we'd be reimbursed for the services that we provided after 5 p.m. That's where another opportunity for some different actions to take place occurred. And again, I will get into that as we go forward. I just kind of want to tighten up this timeline for you. So what we did in terms of services that we anticipated getting funding for, our state services, is we just reassigned our leadership roles. We cut most of the staff out of it, but we had leaders on hand that could provide those direct services and assign some staff in particular to be able to carry those out until we had further clarification. That included our domestic violence services, some of our business program services, and our child care services, some of those as well. So we had the day to kind of sort through, who could we keep on staff for short term? What services can we make sure that we keep going, like things like the domestic violence hotline, and where do we go from here? So basically, that decision was based on our fiduciary responsibility. We just could not guarantee that without reimbursement, we would be able to pay our staff, vendors, and contractors for those days following the notification of the pause. We reacted as quickly as we did so we wouldn't incur debt that we might not have had the means to repay. We communicated quickly to allow the families that depend on us for childcare time to make other arrangements, and also to make sure that people didn't travel. Sometimes it takes people a long time to get to our doors to get services, and we don't want people to show up and have our doors be closed. So we were trying to communicate effectively and quickly. That was our challenge, and that was where we have a lot of opportunity to improve. I have a lot of opportunity to improve what we would do should this situation arise again. We communicated that information in 3 ways. On our Facebook page, that's where a lot of people rely on us to get information. One thing we know, that as soon as we pick up the phone to tell someone in our services that we are having a change, that information gets relayed onto social media almost immediately. That's how people communicate. So we try to get in front of that and communicate information that's accurate, that we can get out so people know it came from us and they know what they're hearing is the truth and includes the information that they need to know. So we put that on our Facebook page. We also sent it to the Wellsville Sun and to the Allegheny Hope newsletter, which are two organizations, in terms of a press release. We did not contact other media organizations, and I did not contact anybody else in regard to sending that information out. So that was on Tuesday. Later in that afternoon, it came to our attention through various sources that Head Start had been exempt from that executive pause order. This, again, was after we'd already communicated that we would not have our services open on that Wednesday, the 30th. We still did not have access to our portal, however, so that was a cause for concern as well that had lingered up until the next day. So on Wednesday, when we got back to, sure. Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Is that better? Okay, I'll try to talk less. I know I talk quickly, and when I'm nervous, I'm rapid pace, so thank you for interrupting me, letting me know. So on Wednesday morning, the day after that, we realized, okay, it looks like we're going to be okay. We realized that our portal was going to open back up for those services. The other two portals that we use for federal funding were still not open, but realized we could open back up. We scheduled a meeting with staff. We talked about how we were going to handle that day's services in terms of the critical urgent services, and then we communicated back out to the community. We'd be reopening for full services on Thursday. We had a full day of Accord having an in-service day on that Friday, so we canceled that instead and had the Head Start children come back on Friday so that at least they would only miss the 2 days of center-based services, and the rest of our programs only miss the 1 day of regular services, and then some not even the whole day because we were able to get other staff and leadership staff in those positions at least to answer questions and kind of move things along. So I can certainly, I did come prepared with a report in terms of our debrief. We heard a lot of feedback from our partners in terms of what we could do better and where the communications issues fell apart. My own plans going forward in terms of improvement, communication with the community, communications with our local representatives, our state and federal representatives, as well as the board of directors, which I can certainly share with you this afternoon, or I can send out and would, welcome any sort of input from each of you. I just want to make it clear we value our relationship with the county. We've done a lot of great projects together, and we are hopeful that we can continue to do that going forward. So that is the end of, and again, we regret the inconvenience and the confusion, especially to the families that need us and come to us for daycare and food and all the other services. Housing, not being there does not feel good to us, and the fact that perhaps we could have avoided that feels worse. So I'm hoping and feel pretty confident that we can pave the way and not have something like that happen again.
Thank you. So that was a lot of information, so I'm going to change my mind here. And, if there are any questions now or comments now that the board has in relation to what was just described. Mr. Barnes?
Yes, thank you for coming and explaining the situation. But I have a question. Other organizations similar to Accord, did they do the same thing that you did, or?
Many did. Many other organizations. There's Head Starts that stand alone that don't have a community action agency around them. I know the Cattaraugus in Wyoming County Head Start shut down, and I think maybe they reopened today. That I'm not sure of. I have been talking to our national leadership group, and there was many organizations across the country due to cash flow issues mostly, and concerns about the reimbursement that shut down as well across the nation.
But your organization is the only one that went through and actually shut down?
No, there's many.
Others did too?
Yes, Cattaraugus County's Head Start was shut down for over a week, actually.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It might benefit us for you to maybe just take a step back and talk about a community action agency, where you draw your authority from, who do you report to, what's all that structure look like?
Sure. The Community Action Agency is legislated, it exists under federal legislation that was passed in 1964. So each Community Action Agency exists by that legislation passed by Congress, which designates or allows each county or each municipality, it could be more than one counties, to select an agency or develop a corporation that would serve as a private nonprofit corporation that receives community services block grant funding. There are some exceptions. Some places have it a public service. New York City does it that way, but most counties, it's a private nonprofit that receives core funding to pull together services for the low-income community. It's based on the idea that those services are designed to meet local needs and not be cookie cutter. So each community has a responsibility to understand what the needs are in their community. We do a full community needs assessment every 3 years to help us figure that out and kind of plan where our services are going to go. We're also required to react quickly if something's going on in the community, and the best example of that I can give you is COVID. It was like, we don't care what you're doing, Accord, it's COVID, and this is what you have to do now to meet the needs of the community. So that is how we exist. When it became block granted, it was initially a direct federal program. It became block granted in the early 80s. And at that point in time, the Department of State, New York State, was put in place as the government agency that collects the funds for New York State community action agencies, and then spreads those funds out according to a specific formula. And they make sure we're compliant with our board structure, make sure we're compliant with New York State nonprofit laws, that we're attending to the needs of the low-income community as we are required to do. And then we explain our plan, which involves all of our services, not just those funded by the Community Services Block Grant, to show how we're addressing the causes and conditions of poverty in our community. So basically, that's it.
Were you provided with any guidance, or was there any reach out at all from the New York State Department of State, either, back on the 28th, 29th, or since then?
No, I did reach out and let them know that, we had shut down and this was our situation, but they did not reach out formally to give us any guidance or structure in terms of what happens now with our funding.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Gretchen?
Thank you for coming. And I agree that many of the programs are very vital that Accord provides. I've been a part of it. We've worked through it on other programs, and I know there's a good relationship with the programs that we're working with now. We don't necessarily always learn from our successes, and I'm very much encouraged, and I thank you for coming up with a plan of action on how we do it, because I think there's lessons we all can learn from it. I mean, not just Accord, maybe us, what can we do too, and so forth. So I appreciate you coming out and speaking to us, so thank you.
Mr. Healy?
Thank you, Chairman. Before you took this action on the 28th, did you check with the county at all?
No,
Did you check with your state elected representatives, your assemblymen, your state senators?
no,
Did you check with the congressional office?
no.
Our two U.S. senators, Mr. Sherman and Ms. Gillibrand.
No.
Thank you.
Ms. Burdick?
I have a couple comments I'd like to make. First of all, I don't like this whole thing and the way we brought you in here. I just think that this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. We're being made to look like the bad guys by our representative, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble for saying this, but I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry. If they had a beef with you, they should have contacted you. And they should have also given you guidance when that pause or whatever it was put in place, instead of just leaving you out on your own and then not allowing you access to your money. I also would like to say that we never hear about all the good things you do. but you do one thing wrong, and look what happens. I have attended a couple of your Accord sessions, I've met with you in person, and the things that you do for the people of this county are amazing. And thank you for doing that. And I'm sure we've all learned a lesson from this, but this is, in my opinion, gotten totally blown out of proportion, and I'm very sorry that this is going on right now. And I'm not proud to be a part of it.
Thank you. Okay, further comments or questions? Mr. Havey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned, I guess, with some of the accusations in the letter from the congressman. Was anything that you did politically motivated at all?
No.
Okay. The letter that we received as a board of legislators was pretty blunt. And I have to say that I don't believe that we were afforded the correct amount of respect in this letter. So, to begin with, that bothered me. Rather than asking if we could participate in a fact-finding exercise, it was more like a hammer. And I must tell you, and I've told other people myself more bluntly, but I must tell you that it offended me. And as near as I can tell from what we've discussed so far, Accord Corporation acted appropriately. Could they have made better choices? Perhaps. But who among us has not made a bad business decision in their life? So, I accept what you've said. It makes perfect sense to me. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further comments or questions before we carry on? Okay, to the extent, Ms. Crispin, that you haven't answered some of the questions directly posed in the letter from the congressman and the senators, I would like to work our way through those. I'll read the questions as best I can. If they've already been answered, I'll just skip over them. I just want to ensure that those questions that were raised are adequately answered for their offices, so we can move on. Does that make sense? Who specifically made the decision to suspend services? I think you answered that, and I'm not trying to answer for you. But can you clarify, was that in concert with your leadership team, or was it individually?
I always consult with the leadership team. They have the deep knowledge of each program, but ultimately the decision is mine.
Okay. And just to confirm, there was no correspondence between your leadership team, and the Accord board, between the executive order and the decision to close?
Just a brief word in the middle of an executive, trying to figure things out, but no, that's correct.
In the past, we've had government shutdowns, we've had sudden, loss of funding and so forth. Is that the normal procedure would be to consult with your board of directors, or are you given the authority to kind of act on their behalf without consultation?
Generally, we have the authority, but also generally, we have some notion that these things are coming our way, and we can talk about what the plan of action is prior to receiving a communication such as that.
The third question, what government oversight was involved in the decision? It sounds as though there's really no direct and immediate government oversight in decision-making such as this. Is that normal?
That's normal.
And
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up question on
Yep.
that. Did you notify any of the governments you have contracts with of your decision after the fact?
Yeah, we notified the Department of State. We were on the phone with the Office of Children and Family Services discussing domestic violence services. Our leadership team was in contact with their program analysts or program managers in terms of what was going on with the situation and our hours, et cetera.
Did you notify the county of any, we have contracts with Accord as well. Did you notify us?
No, I didn't, mostly because we were figuring out how to piece together what would be interrupted, or most of it wasn't actually interrupted, so no, we did not.
I think, and this is an aside, as we have contracts actually imminent we have contracts to be considered by this board with Accord in the next couple weeks, it might behoove the board to ask the county administrator and the county attorney to develop some strategies to add maybe some more, I don't want to say oversight, but some more clarity in the contract language about what the board would expect in terms of communication, reporting requirements, and so forth. That's nothing we need to talk about today, but that's maybe one solution that can come out of this, is maybe a fresh look at those contracts and how we can improve our position. Mr. Healy?
You said you notified 2 state agencies that you have contracts with,
Yes.
but not the county, which you have a contract with.
Correct.
Doesn't make sense to me, but can you explain that?
Well, I think the best explanation I can offer is that it all happened in a very compressed amount of time. So by the time that we were notifying people, we were also notifying them that we were opening back up. So I think it would have been, we just didn't get to the county that day, trying to get through the notifications and the situations that we were in. And then by the time the day ended, I think it was like 6:30 or something, we realized we were going to write another communication telling everyone when we'd be opened back up again.
Since it's a decent segue, I'm going to jump around questions here. What, if any, contractual services with Allegheny County were suspended during that time period? How about,
None
let's
that
not-
I can
won't-
think of, none that I can think of that it was just a matter of hours that we wouldn't have been, we kind of figured out who would be in charge of what activity that, excuse me, almost immediately to be able to provide those services, so I don't think any.
Off the top of your head, what services does Accord provide to Allegheny County?
We have agreement to operate the Fatherhood Connection Program. We have domestic violence non-residential services program, and we did have domestic violence staff available. And we have housing programs that we refer back and forth, and we have I'm drawing a blank, there's one more. Oh, Wheels to Work program, which is a point in time in terms of how much funding we have to be able to offer vehicle loans to people. So if we don't have any money, we don't have an active Wheels to Work programs, and which we didn't at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. Jumping back up, it's your contention that Accord, as a community action agency with authority derived from the federal government, has the authority to suspend services without any permissions from anywhere up or down the chain.
Correct.
Okay. Answered maybe a little bit, but maybe if you could revisit it. What oversight mechanisms will prevent future closures?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a plan of improvement that we have been working on. This is just a draft. We'd like some additional time, obviously, but we have some measures that would go into place, and I think we've talked a little bit about them. But immediately, or as soon as practical, upon learning of any unanticipated changes to our funding, we would immediately reach out to the appropriate federal, state, and local officials to gain necessary clarification, communicate any immediate concerns regarding our operations, and determine action steps, including any recommended by our elected representatives. We will also notify the Board of Directors, fully explain all factors impacting continued operations, and then the decision of the Board of Directors will be obtained and will be documented in terms of closing or pausing operations. We will notify funding sources to assure each decision is based on accurate and updated information. We will assure clearer communication on all operations that remain open, including domestic violence hotline, our safe dwelling, shelter services, et cetera. We did realize that some of that communication in terms of what was closed and open wasn't clear. We can do a better job at that. Any communication going forward regarding any unplanned interruption in services will contain details specific to the changes in operation only. information prepared for any media regarding changes to operations resulting from actions by federal, state, or local elected officials will be reviewed and approved by the Board of Directors prior to the release. We've also worked on discussing any challenges to our cash flow that would impact operations should something change. And we will make sure that some of this is just procedural, et cetera. But identify a clear chain of events that will happen routinely when we are, our accounts receivable coming from our funding sources for reimbursement are delayed, so that we are continuously contacting the funding source, and also reaching out to our representatives as well to see if we can obtain assistance in getting funding that is owed to us and overdue.
Thank you. Mr. Ricky?
How about funding to back you up? 'Cause it looks like you have a cash flow problem at sometimes when you're kind of thin.
Sometimes.
Is there a bank or even the county that could guarantee the money in case you can't get a hold of the state or the feds on time? Is that in the works?
That's a good question. We do have a line of credit that we do access sometimes when we get in those pinches, and we did access it actually for this payroll. So we have a line of credit. The scary part about a line of credit is there's no source to pay the interest. We're not allowed to use funding to pay interest on line of credit, and the interest right now is crushing, as you know, so that's always a kind of a scary endeavor. And we did have some conversation with county officials in terms of, if there's something that we could do, like to assist with cash flow, we would definitely seek out any opportunities. We do always try to raise unrestricted funds that we could use in the meantime, but we'd have to raise a lot to get through a couple days payroll even, and it's hard to get people to contribute towards your slush fund. So we struggle with that. All of our grants are, what comes in goes out, as they should be. So that's a constant challenge, and we do need to work on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Healy?
Comment here, I guess, maybe even a question for you. Sometimes we get revenues from the state and the federal government also, and we realize the same problems, that they always aren't timely in their payments. But if you got some sort of a notification of this nature yourself as chairman of the board, that the federal and state funding was ceasing, or federal funding was ceasing, I trust you would not shut down the county government without verifying it.
That's true, Mr. Healy. I will grant Accord that we have the benefit of a very healthy fund balance, thanks to our treasurer, that puts us in a financial position where we can ride out those storms probably a little bit better than a nonprofit. I will say, that was one of the concerns expressed to me by the state and federal electeds, is that it shouldn't only take a 4-hour pause in access to federal funding to shut down, services as important as the ones you provide. I understand it's a challenge when you are almost entirely grant funded to build a large fund balance, but have you discussed either as a board or as a leadership team how to improve that financial position?
Yeah, we discuss that a lot, pretty much every month. But in this case, it was understanding I think the balance between being in that unusual, even though we have cash flow struggles, what happened that week was unusual. It was a very high level of unreimbursed expenses combined with the payroll, combined with the suddenness. So that was like a perfect storm. But I think going forward would be just to continue to try to fundraise. And if we have an ability to set aside a little bit of money to be able to do that, I think more critically is to understand what's happening before we make the decision to shut down, if at all possible. And again, reach out to our elected officials to see if we can get clearer guidance so we wouldn't be faced with making that type of decision.
Ms. Root?
I just want to make a comment. Thank you for coming in and talking with us today and having a conversation with us. And it was very good to hear from you what went on. But I just want to make a general comment about nonprofits and cash flow in general. I sit on several boards, and they all have cash flow problems. I sit on one board that got $300,000, and they have 150 of it, and the year's over, and they're waiting 6 months. So I think this conversation, if anything comes out of this, we have a lot to learn from each other here today. But also, I think our state and federal elected officials can play a role in this. This is not just you're having a problem with cash flow. Most nonprofits have problems, and they wait 6 months, if not more. I think I've heard up to 2 years on getting some money back from our state and federal government. So perhaps we could raise this conversation back to our state and federal elected officials and see if they can help us with a more timely payment of these grant funds that all these nonprofits struggle with trying to pay their bills with the cash flow. I just throw that out there.
Thank you. Mr. Healy?
Well, once again, I find myself agreeing with Mrs. Root, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand my questions here today, to think that I do not support Accord Corporation or the vital services that they provide.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Stockton?
Just clarify some of my thinking. You mentioned a 4-hour window, but when this started, when this was going on, there was no knowledge that it would be over in 4 hours, right?
No.
So the 4-hour window is almost, to me, in terms of making decisions, doesn't exist.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Havey?
Continuing what Mr. Stockton was saying, I have the notice here from Executive Office of the President. It looks to me as though this could be as much as a 2-week pause, reading this. Maybe I'm misreading it. But if that's what the Accord officials read and felt that it said, I wouldn't be surprised that they would be concerned about their funding. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add, I believe that memo came out the night prior or sometime overnight. Throughout the day, there was extra information other than just that memo. I believe clarifying statements were made by the White House. The county was able to call our own federal representative in the afternoon and clarify that as well. So there was clarifying information available. The time frame of it, I don't know, but that memo did come out overnight.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions thus far, the last question posed by the congressman, and I'm unsure of its relevance now because I don't know where we are. There was some kind of stay issued by the court following the executive order, and then there was the order was rescinded. But I believe it's the intention of the executive to continue to seek to cease funding associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. What am I saying here? Gender ideology and so forth. The question is, do you provide any services that support or would be contrary to the intentions of the executive to cease funding of those types of programs?
No, we don't.
Thank you. So I'm going to give one last opportunity to everybody to provide comment or questions. Mr. Barnes.
Yes, what kind of financial backup do you have? Well, that's not worded properly. What I'm getting at is who goes over your books to prove everything is the way it's supposed to be?
We have an audit. We have the federal audit that we do once a year, and then we also have our various programs also have financial auditors that come in and go through our books to make sure that we're spending each grant according to the terms and conditions.
You've never had any problems in that?
I can't say never. We've had a time or two, but we've had clean audits for the most part, the last 3 years at least. Nothing ever that was serious, I would say.
That sounds like it's normal situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Just one last thought from me, and I would feel badly if we didn't leave this meeting without me expressing this. I tend to agree with the congressmen and the senators that a person reading the correspondence that you had with your staff, the social media posts, and some of the emails that I was privy to from employees to their electeds would lead a person to believe that the actions were in some part politically motivated. So with that said, I certainly will take you at your word, but maybe offer unsolicited advice that accord, be very careful with the way they craft their messaging from here forward. Because, you've been at the game a long time. Your funding comes from, a person wearing a red tie, a blue tie, it changes all the time. And, you have to learn to work within the confines of the administration and the legislative branches that you have. So I just put that out there. I have a feeling, and I know I told you in private, there are people out there that will never have their minds changed other than to think that it was a politically motivated closure. And like you said, we learn from it, and we learn to do better next time. So I do want to give Carrie or Leslie, if you have an opportunity to say anything in closing, we'll do that, and then we'll conclude the meeting.
I really don't have anything to add. Again, thank you all for being here and listening to what transpired over the few days after being in January. But we do have a plan in place. We do have a plan in place. As Leslie shared with you, the board and the staff and Leslie's going to be looking at this plan in place to put all those safety precautions in and keep everybody up to date if anything does happen. This was an anomaly, for sure, and things moved really fast. So we appreciate your time and listening to the explanation.
Thank you.
Again, thank you all for your time. I am looking forward to resuming normal operations, being available to our community. Obviously, anything that we do that hurts our credibility hurts the people that we're trying to serve. We want them to trust and believe in us, so we want to get back down to the business that we do every day, and hope that we can move forward from here. And thank you.
Thank you. Carrie, do you want to do this again next week, but with Ardent?
No, thank you.
Okay.
We can talk about good stuff, though.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of good stuff to go around, and moving forward, we'll stay focused on the good. And I don't remember who said it, but our relationship with the court is very important. We want to continue that relationship. We look forward to building robust contracts in the coming weeks here, and making sure that we're on solid ground on both sides, and we continue doing what we're meant to do, which is serving the people of Allegheny County. So, with that, would anyone care to make a motion to adjourn? Let's run through this. Hold on. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Anything for the good of the order, Mr. Healy or Mr. Havey?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, would anyone care to make a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Legislator Hanchett.